Welcome to another episode of the Literary Lutheran Reads the Book of Concord. Today we're continuing to go through Article XIIb, Confession and Satisfaction. Let us continue. The Church Fathers on Satisfaction. The word satisfaction has been left from this rite of public repentance. The Holy Fathers were unwilling to welcome back the fallen or the notorious sinners unless, as far as it was possible, their repentance had been first examined and shown publicly. There seem to have been many causes for this. To discipline those who had fallen served as an example, as a gloss upon the decrees reminds us. Also, it was improper to admit notorious people immediately to communion. These customs have long since grown obsolete. It is not necessary to restore them, because they are not necessary for the forgiveness of sins before God. The Fathers did not maintain that people merit the forgiveness of sins through such customs or works. These spectacles, outward ceremonies, usually lead astray the ignorant, who thought that they merited the forgiveness of sins before God by these works. If anyone believes this, he has the faith of a Jewish person and a pagan. For even the pagans had certain remedies for offenses through which they imagined they were reconciled to God. Now, even though the custom has been cast aside, the word satisfaction still remains. A small part of the custom also remains of prescribing in confession certain satisfactions, which they define as works that are not required. We call them canonical satisfactions. Like the complete listing of sins, we hold that canonical satisfactions are not necessary by divine law for the forgiveness of sins. Neither were those ancient displays of satisfactions and public repentance necessary by divine law for the forgiveness of sins. The teaching about faith must be kept, that we receive the forgiveness of sins for Christ's sake through faith, not for the sake of our works that precede or follow. This is why we have discussed especially the question of satisfactions. The righteousness of faith should not be clouded over in submitting to them. Nor should people think that they receive the forgiveness of sins for the sake of these works. Many current sayings in the schools aid the error. Among these are those that give the definition of satisfaction, namely, that it is done to reconcile divine displeasure. Nevertheless, the adversaries admit that satisfactions do not help in the pardon of guilt. They imagine that satisfactions help in delivering one from punishment, whether of purgatory or other punishments. They teach that God pardons guilt in the forgiveness of sins. Yet because divine justice requires sin to be punished, he transfers eternal punishment into temporal punishment. Further, they add that a part of this temporal punishment is pardoned by the power of the keys, but that the rest is delivered by means of satisfactions. It cannot be understood which punishments the power of the keys partially forgive unless the adversaries say that a part of the punishments of purgatory is forgiven. That would mean that the satisfactions are only punishments delivering from purgatory. They say satisfactions benefit even though they are presented by those who have fallen again into mortal sin, as though indeed the divine displeasure could be appeased by those who are in mortal sin. This entire matter is fake and recently made up without scriptural authority and the old writers of the Church. Not even Lombard speaks of satisfactions in this way. The scholastics saw that there were satisfactions in the Church. They did not notice that these displays had been set up for both the purpose of example and for testing those who desired to be welcomed back by the Church. In a word, they did not see that it was a discipline and entirely a secular matter. So they superstitiously imagine that these displays benefit not for discipline before the Church, but for reconciling God. In other places, they frequently, with great incompetence, have confused spiritual and civil matters. The same happens also regarding satisfactions. But at various places, the explanation of the canons confirms that these observances were set up for the sake of church discipline. This has been the Literary Lutheran Reads the Book of Concord, and I wish you a blessed day.